marketers. Welcome to our webinar, Are You Measuring What Matters? This is the first webinar in a series of 3 dedicated to proof, so helping you build your case for marketing on LinkedIn and showing why LinkedIn is the #1 social platform for lead generation. So this is our first webinar. It's basically Metrics 101, so we're going to help you cut through all the jargon. We're going to get down to what metrics you should matter throughout the funnel, how you can scale your efforts on LinkedIn. We're going to ask our panelists here some fun questions. First, I wanted to go through a couple of housekeeping items. So there's no dial-in. All audio is coming from your computer itself. Please submit your questions through the Q&A console. We're going to reserve about 15 to 20 minutes at the end for questions, so get your questions ready. We also have some awesome resources inside our console that I will talk about a little bit later. But first, I want to introduce myself. My name is Alex Rinn, and I oversee the social media strategy for LinkedIn Marketing Solutions. I also help manage the LinkedIn Marketing Solutions blog, and I create content meant to inspire marketers to succeed in their lives and in their careers. And now I will hand it over to let my lovely panelists introduce themselves. They're both top demand generation marketers here at LinkedIn.
Great. Hi, I'm Patrick Chen. I'm a senior manager for the demand generation team for LinkedIn Sales Solutions. Our team works primarily on marketing and generating leads for our flagship product, which is LinkedIn Sales Navigator. It's a tool for sales professionals to prospect and build relationships on LinkedIn.
Great, and I'm Amanda Bates. I'm on Alex's team, LinkedIn Marketing Solutions. I'm a group manager of demand generation, and my team is also responsible for generating leads for our sales team. I have the unique pleasure of getting to market to marketers as we are promoting our advertising products on LinkedIn.
Great. Well, I want to thank you again both for being here very much. And also, just so our audience gets to know our panelists a little bit better, I wanted to ask them to share something that's not on your LinkedIn profile. So something that would work next to you for like 10 years and just not know about you.
Yeah, so something that's not on my LinkedIn profile is that I do not get brain freeze. Which means that I can drink Slurpees super fast and I can have as much ice cream as I want. So
amazing skill to have.
Thanks.
Well, so mine's less of a skill and more of a fun fact, but I'm a big JT or Justin Timberlake fan, and I have been to 5 of his concerts, 4 in 1 year. So
awesome. And Amanda recently got married, and she walked into a reception to, what is it? Can't Fight the Feeling?
Can't Stop the Feeling.
Yes. Great jam. And I'm going to add mine as well. So I am not a vegetarian, but I'm actually a veggie burger connoisseur. I travel all around San Francisco, and if there's a veggie burger on the menu, you know I'm going to try it. If you are in the Bay Area sometime soon, go to San Francisco Athletic Club and get theirs because it is the best. It's not fancy, but it's awesome. So now I'm going to just go into the agenda items real quick so you know what we're going to be talking about for the day. First, as I mentioned, there's a bunch of really confusing acronyms when it comes to metrics and analytics, so we're going to cut through the jargon, define the terms so you guys know what's going on there. We're going to talk about the difference between metrics and analytics. We're going to talk about what metrics you can use specifically to understand business impact, and then which metrics you should look at for each channel you use. Then we're going to talk about what steps you can take to track campaigns throughout the sales funnel. We're going to dive into the ever-interesting relationship of sales and marketing. We're going to ask Amanda and Patrick here some fun questions just so we can get to know them a little bit better. And we're going to end with a Q&A, as I mentioned before, so get your questions ready. But first, we are going to start with a fun interactive poll question to get to know you, our audience, a little bit better. So, question for you. How would you rate your marketing's knowledge of metrics? Your answer options are A, we're golden. I don't even know why we're on this webinar because we got this. 2, we're still learning. Or 3, we're at the very beginning. We're just starting to dive in. And I'll give you a couple seconds to respond, and then we'll talk about the results. All right, so it looks like it's kind of a split between people that are still learning and people that are just beginning to dive in, which is awesome because we have some beginner and then a little bit more intermediate stuff on this webinar that we'll cover. So let's dive in. My first question for you guys is, why do you think marketers struggle to measure what matters? How can we crack the code here?
I'll take that one, Alex. So I think one of the biggest reasons is because of all the jargon. There are so many acronyms out there, different things. I've spoken on many webinars where people just get confused by the terminology we use. So we wanted to start today, and I wanted to share some of those terms to make sure upfront everyone is crystal clear on the definitions of the terms we're using throughout the webcast. So the first term I want to talk through is CTR, which is click-through rate. And this is really just taking the number of clicks you get on a display ad or even an email and then dividing by the number of impressions or sends. So it's what percentage of people are actually interacting with your ad or email. The next one is, I'm drawing a blank on what the next one is. Sorry.
Is this slide not appearing?
It's not appearing. That's okay.
There might be a slight delay. Sorry about that. Oh,
there we go. Cost per lead. Yes, I knew it began with a C.
Yeah.
So cost per lead is another quick and easy one. It's just looking at how much you spend on a program and then dividing by the number of leads generated. So quick math on that is if I spend $100 and I generate 4 leads, it's $25 cost per lead. The next one would be a marketing qualified lead, and this is one we get questions about a lot. And what this means is basically it's something that marketing defines. So what happens is marketing typically comes together and they agree on the definition of a qualified lead. What makes a lead eligible to be passed to the sales team? So a lot of times you're looking at things like demographic data. Maybe you're looking at the marketing activity, like how many times have they been to your website, what different pieces of content did they download, what types of content. And so all of those things factor into a marketing qualified lead, and you define that, and then marketing qualified leads are typically what gets passed to your sales team for follow-up. So moving on to lead score, which is actually a pretty big factor in a marketing qualified lead. A lead score is basically a numeric value. Sometimes it can be letters, but usually a numeric value assigned to a lead based on different attributes. And so as I just mentioned, it could be things like demographic data, like is it a big company or a small company? What is their seniority in the organization? And then you can combine that with things like marketing activity, and that gives you your lead score. So next up, moving through the funnel, so we have our marketing qualified leads that have been scored, and now we're going to pass them to sales, and so that brings us to sales qualified leads. And a sales qualified lead is pretty simple. It's pretty simply what it says. It means that sales has taken that marketing qualified lead, looked at it, and deemed it qualified to follow up on. All right, so now that we've covered some of the basic terms in the beginning of the funnel, I just want to cover off on a few other terms that get a little bit more into the technology side of marketing. Mm-hmm. So we'll move into marketing automation system. This is a pretty basic term. I assume most people are probably pretty familiar with this one, but these are systems that use to automate your marketing programs. So common terms out there, or common brands out there, are Marketo and Eloqua. And these are systems that give you the ability to automate emails. It actually gives you the ability to score leads and then actually push those into a CRM, which brings me to my next term. So a CRM is a customer relationship management tool. Typical names or systems for these are Microsoft Dynamics and Salesforce. And so this helps a sales rep keep track of all of the leads they're following up on. And it also gives marketing the ability to track these people as well. And you can tie them to marketing campaigns and therefore actually see what kind of revenue you're generating from your marketing campaigns. So that brings us to the last one, which is attribution. And attribution is a big buzzword in the industry. It is something that all marketers want to solve for. And what it is it's looking at which campaigns are getting credit for the sale if marketing has influenced that deal. And so there's a couple of different types of attribution. There's first touch attribution, meaning marketers might say that the first campaign that person came in through is what's going to get credit. There's last touch attribution, meaning the last campaign would get credit. And then there's multi-touch attribution, meaning in most cases, marketers have touched a prospect multiple times, and so you would spread that revenue gained across all of those campaigns, usually evenly. So that's actually a more complex type of metric or analytics that we're not going to cover too much on today, but I did want to mention it because I think it's an important metric that marketers should be aware of.
Okay, just so our audience knows, what attribution model do you use on the LinkedIn Marketing Solutions team?
Yeah, so at LinkedIn, so attribution is a tough one to solve. It's something that I have spent a lot of my time doing as a marketer. And so right now we currently use a last touch attribution model, but we are very close to launching a multi-touch attribution in some of our business units. So we're actually really excited about getting kind of to that marketing nirvana and finally being able to give credit to these smaller campaigns.
Awesome.
Cool, yeah. And just adding on to kind of what Amanda was saying, another way to kind of think about a lot of the metrics and a lot of the terminology is just through the lens of the marketing funnel. And so the slide up here is really talking about kind of these are the high-level important metrics that generally as a marketing organization you're kind of reporting out on these metrics to higher level execs. These are the metrics that really matter to them. So if you think about it from the funnel perspective, at the top of the funnel you've got your leads, and those are generally people who are engaging with your marketing campaigns, whether it's filling out a form or attending a trade show or an event. Past that, as they drop lower into the funnel, they get to the MQL level that Amanda had mentioned, as well as the SQL level, which is that sales qualified lead level. And then beyond that, once sales has deemed a particular prospect ready to be sold to, they create an opportunity, and that's called a sales qualified opportunity. And so they'll work that deal until close, and hopefully you're bringing in a lot of new customers, which are at the bottom of your funnel.
Awesome, thank you. Very thorough answers, appreciate that. So now I'm going to pivot a little bit, talk about metrics and analytics. So a common misconception among marketers is that metrics and analytics represent the same thing, and while they both improve the value of marketing, they're definitely not interchangeable. So my question for you guys is, what do you think the difference is between metrics and analytics? Can you explain a little bit more about that?
So I like to think about metrics as the what you measure. Another term that we can put to this is your KPIs, or your key performance indicators, another acronym for you. But these are things like if you're looking at email, it could be open rate, click-through rate, click-to-open rate, just different metrics that apply to the different channels you're using. And we're going to actually dive more into that. Analytics, on the other hand, is taking those metrics and trying to identify trends and insights from them. And then what I like to think about analytics is something I kind of do on a monthly basis, quarterly basis, and sometimes weekly, depending on what I'm looking at. But analytics is what helps me decide what I'm going to do next. So if I look at something that I was doing in Q1 and I'm looking at the results and I'm analyzing them, that might actually tell me, ooh, that didn't work. I should pivot and try a different type of messaging, or maybe tweak my target audience in my campaign for Q2. And that just happened to us. So we're actually targeting or messaging differently to different parts of our audience this year in Q2. And so that's kind of how I see the difference between metrics and analytics. Metrics is getting you the numbers, and then analytics is doing something with it. Right,
and definitely as a content marketer myself, and for any of the content marketers watching, analytics are huge in helping us guide our content strategy and just looking at what's working and what's not working and what we should be producing more of. So definitely. Patrick, question for you. Can you give us an example of how you use analytics in your day-to-day job at LinkedIn?
Yeah, definitely. We use analytics all the time. Kind of like Amanda was saying, it really helps us to guide what we're going to be doing in the next quarter, or even in the next coming weeks, in terms of what campaigns we're running, how we're targeting our campaigns, and what we're kind of offering up to our prospects. One good example recently is we have something called the Social Selling Index, which is basically a score for sales professionals to use to really measure how well they're doing kind of in social selling. And it really looks at like behavior on LinkedIn and how you're engaging with your prospects. And so we have a page on our website that talks about SSI is what we call it, and you can get your own score. And so when we were looking at our web analytics for our microsite, we saw that that page was basically the top traffic page, aside from our homepage. And so because we saw a lot of people requesting their SSI scores, we decided to run a follow-on marketing campaign just to those folks who had requested their scores, to offer them up content that's relevant to SSI, for them to kind of, guides on how to improve their SSI, what SSI means. And that campaign ended up doing really well for us because it was relevant to what folks were doing based on the metrics we saw on our website, and it really provided value for those folks too.
Yeah, awesome, great example. I mean, in general, as marketers, we're constantly on the hook to prove business impact and to prove and improve ROI. So next subject I want to talk to you about is how to measure business impact. I'm sure a lot of people tuned in want to know a little bit more about that. So what metrics do you use specifically to understand your business impact?
All right, well, I'm going to turn it over to a little analogy, a sports analogy. So let's talk about baseball for a second, and let's use that as a comparison to metrics and how we think about the different tactics and channels we're using. So in baseball, you have two different types of hitters. There's a leadoff hitter whose responsibility is to get on base and potentially drive runs. And then there's a cleanup hitter, and their role is strictly to drive in those runs. It doesn't matter if they get an out in the process. It's just, are they driving in runs? And so you're not going to analyze those two players on the same metrics. You have to think about them in two different ways. And that same analogy holds true in marketing when we're starting to think about what channels we're using and then how we're measuring those. I'm not going to actually measure a display ad the same way I would measure an email.
Right.
And so let me talk a little bit about some of the ways I would think about a couple of different channels and how I would measure them. So an email, we'll start with that one because that is the most common channel I think out there. What things I'm going to look at when I'm looking at my email is click to open rate. So how many people are opening based on the number of clicks, how many people are clicking based on the number of opens I received. What's my conversion rate look like? And if the email's purpose is to drive more lower funnel things like demos or contact us, CTAs, then I'm going to look and see if it's driving revenue for my pipeline.
Did you already define CTA?
I did not. A CTA, good question, Alex. A CTA stands for call to action. And so that is another term we use pretty frequently. Okay, so moving on to display. Display is a tactic that we tend to use sometimes for lead generation, in all honesty, but most of the time it's more of an awareness play. So when I'm looking at metrics for display, I'm going to look at things closer, more like new website visitors. Am I seeing more traffic come to my website? What's my click-through rate on that campaign? So those are different tactics to kind of measure brand awareness. Are people seeing it? Are people responding to it? I want to jump into retargeting, which is a little bit lower in the funnel. And the idea around retargeting, too, to take a step back, is just that is targeting people who come to your website and then leave, kind of following them with ads and trying to drive them back to your website and eventually convert. So on retargeting, because these people have already potentially come to my website or a different landing page, I'm gonna want to look at things like, is the quality of the people coming back the way I want it to be? So what's my lead quality? Are we seeing an increase in conversions? Are we seeing an increase in the number of form fills submitted on our website? And ultimately, because it's a little bit lower funnel and people have already expressed engagement, are we driving pipeline and revenue again? And then finally, sponsored content, which is one of the LinkedIn products. I want to talk a little bit about this because there's a couple of different purposes that you can use sponsored content for. So the first one is engagement. And so are people responding to this content in the newsfeed? Are they engaging with it? And then you can also look at it from a brand perception. Am I building my brand? Am I shaping the perception of my brand that I want people to see? But sponsored content can, just like it can be kind of more of a brand play, it can also be a really great driver of leads. So I'm also going to be looking at things like my conversion rate, and am I driving leads, and am I driving the right leads? Am I reaching the right people? So there's kind of a mix of different metrics that you can use for each one, and some of them might overlap and some might be completely different.
Okay, great.
So, and then to kind of just wrap that up, I think what's important to drive home is that, metrics should never be taken at face value. When you're sharing these with stakeholders, it's really important that you explain the why behind those metrics, like why you're looking at those types of KPIs.
Yep, definitely makes sense. And I mean, for each marketing channel used, there are different metrics associated that you should look at to determine success. So Patrick, maybe you can dive into what metrics you look at for each channel.
Yeah, so I mean, there are a ton of channels. So every channel, like you said, is different. I'll kind of just go over a couple of them. I think one channel that, or one type of campaign that's pretty relevant to us would probably be webinars. And so I think for webinars, there are a lot of interesting metrics you can look at to evaluate that success. I think there are kind of the standard metrics that you look at in terms of the number of people that you get to register, and what kind of quality those folks are. So if you're getting a lot of marketing qualified leads from that, and how those leads convert over time, do they become opportunities? Do they turn into revenue? Other things, though, that are interesting on the webinar front can also be kind of more top of funnel. So looking at what their engagement with a webinar is. A lot of webinar tools today allow you to look at how much time they spent on the webinar, actually looking at the content, how many questions they asked, what types of questions they asked, things like that, to really understand not only are these people registering and attending, but how did they engage with the content? Did they find it valuable? And I think those are some of the more kind of nuanced metrics that are helpful in terms of follow-up campaigns and things like that. And so, yeah, I think a lot of the stuff that Amanda was talking about in terms of email marketing is really important too. So understanding kind of all those top of funnel kind of metrics in terms of open rate, click-through rate, things like that, and all the way down through the funnel in terms of revenue conversion. But also, I think one thing that's important is looking at, for your particular email, like what are they clicking on specifically? Are you delivering the type of content that is relevant to that particular audience? So understanding who's getting what and if what they're getting is really resonating.
Yep, totally. I think, Amanda, on our team, we talk a lot about having a really good mix of different types of campaigns with different initiatives. So whether it's lead generation or thought leadership or brand awareness, how do you determine what channel to use for which initiative?
I mean, it ultimately depends on the goal. So if we are looking to do something like a webinar, I'll use that example again, then I'm going to look for channels that are that I know are more likely to convert. So probably sponsored content is a great tool for that, as well as email. Another good channel for us is to use sponsored in-mail. So those are things we're going to use for a webinar. But if we're looking to potentially just promote something like we had Proof Week 2 weeks ago, that's more of a brand play. So we're gonna use some more display channels and social channels, as well as probably complement it with some email. But definitely looking for those channels that are going to be more top of the funnel focused and get us more reach.
Yeah.
Just to add a point, I think that it also depends on who your audience is, like for your product, like who you're selling into, because depending on kind of the seniority of the role, what type of role it is, people will consume different types of content depending on where they sit, right? So if I'm, let's say, the CEO of a company, I might not have time to sit on a webinar per se, or if I'm kind of more in the weeds, I'm a practitioner, I'm working on a lot of execution for campaigns, like maybe I'll have more time to download a really in-depth ebook on how to improve my game, something like that. So it really just depends on that as well.
Okay, and what about testing and optimizing? How do you optimize for each of these channels?
You go ahead.
Yeah, in terms of testing and optimizing, I think there are a lot of different tools out there that you can use, but I think one of the mantras that we always try and follow by is making sure that you're testing on every single campaign that you're sending out there. There's kind of not enough testing that you could possibly do, right? Always be testing, right? There's so much stuff you could test, from kind of email subject line to the copy, the CTA that you're using, even to what offer you're giving to what types of people. So you can test your different targeting tactics and things like that. You can test landing pages, right? So using kind of like a quick tool like Optimizely or something like that to do A/B testing on your landing page. So there's just a ton to test, and I think the one thing to really take home is just to always try something new, and to make use of every kind of email send or campaign you're running. Yeah,
and you mentioned a lot of different tests, like the landing pages and the copy and the call to action and like the imagery and et cetera. Can you talk about one test that maybe was not, the results, it wasn't what you expected, or it surprised you?
Something that surprised me?
You're never surprised.
I mean, hopefully you're not surprised, but yeah, sometimes you will be surprised. I think one of the tests that we ran recently that was actually pretty interesting, maybe not totally surprising, but still interesting, was just we've been doing a lot of segmenting in terms of the type of content that we create and deliver to our prospects. And so we've started to segment a lot of that content based on what stage the buyer's in, so top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel. And so what we were A/B testing was our targeting, right? So delivering this type of content to audiences that we think would want to consume that type of content. So we want to deliver a top of funnel piece to someone who we believe prefers top of funnel content. And so we did a couple of A/B tests around that to really understand whether or not our targeting was working. And in the end, it did turn out that those who we thought wanted to receive top of funnel content ended up converting way better on top of funnel content pieces that we actually delivered.
Okay, that's very interesting. Let's shift a little bit and talk. We touched briefly on tools, but what are the essential tools that marketers should have in their toolbox, or like a team that's just like starting out? Like what are the basics, the essentials?
So, I mean, I think the basics are definitely trying to get a marketing automation system in-house, even if it's at a basic level, because that's going to give you a tool for like your database, having the ability to send emails, and then creating some automation in some of that. So I think that's probably the first and foremost tool. And then to complement that, you would want a CRM system, which hopefully your sales team would have already in place, so that you can start setting up the pipes to track all the way through to closed opportunities. So those are the big ones. I think other important tools, probably, once you got a little bit of traction going in your marketing, maybe a webinar platform if that's something you're interested in. Mm-hmm. Optimizely, as Patrick mentioned, for A/B testing is a great tool. Definitely Google Analytics. It's a pretty easy one to get set up and running, but you want to be tracking what's happening on your website, conversions, and where your visitors are coming from and what they're doing. So those are kind of my basic ones. Do you have any others to add?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with all those points. I think, especially for small companies just starting out, maybe marketing automation is kind of like a little too sophisticated for them. So I know a lot of people start out with ESPs or email service providers. So something like a MailChimp or something like that, where you can start off small. If your budget's smaller, they have like a lot of free tiers. And so you can start off with a little bit of automation. But the great thing about it is it does provide you kind of those metrics around email that you need. And then you can kind of step into things like marketing automation using those systems to track all your marketing campaigns.
And are there any tools that Amanda didn't mention that are notable that you use on your team? I know she ran through a lot of them, but just anything that comes to mind.
Well, one thing that I definitely use a lot is an A/B test statistical significance tool. Mm-hmm. Because anytime you run a test, right, like you get this data back, you really want to understand if it's statistically significant, if your results actually mean anything. Mm-hmm. And so I use that a lot to kind of compare the different tests that I'm running to see if version A or version B actually won out.
Awesome. Now we're going to shift again and talk a little bit about our 3 steps to true measurement nirvana. Obviously, tracking campaigns is super important to marketers. We want to look at which ones are working, which ones are not doing so well, and identifying opportunities for improvement and optimization. So what steps can marketers take to track campaigns through the sales funnel?
So I'm going to tie this back a little bit to what I just mentioned about marketing automation and CRMs and kind of building that pipe for being able to track all the way down to closed opportunities. So really the way I like to think about this when you are kind of getting started in measurement is starting at the top. So what is the kind of big action that most marketers are taking? And a lot of that goes back to landing pages. So starting with your landing page conversion, looking at those metrics, kind of building on that. And then kind of identifying that next step. Once they come in, once they've filled out a form, downloaded a piece of content, or registered for a webcast, are they a marketing qualified lead? Are you reaching the right people? Are you able to pass these on to your sales team? And then from there, starting to look at those opportunities that have been created. So does sales agree with you? Do they think that these are worthy of following up on and potentially selling into? And then the next step there would, of course, be, are we closing these opportunities, or sales closing these opportunities? So what are your closed won opportunities? And then finally tracking that all the way through to revenue, which is kind of the marketing nirvana, the end state. You want to be able to really show and prove your ROI on your campaigns. So to do this, there's kind of 3 steps that I like to think about. And they're basically people, process, and technology. So I'll talk through these a little bit. So first, on people, I can't stress enough how important sales and marketing alignment is. This is really what's going to, I think, accelerate you in your career as a marketer if you can align with sales. It is so important to have alignment on the metrics you're tracking and then also your goals. So yes, marketing might set the definition of a marketing qualified lead, but it's certainly important to get sales to weigh in on that. Right. And then, of course, the next step of that is, what is the definition of a sales qualified lead? You both sort of need to buy into that as well. So sales might set that, but marketing needs to also have some input into that as well. And so just aligning on those terms is really going to help start to kind of build that process in the sales journey. And then, the ultimate step is really to get also executive alignment and executive weigh-in. So really, that's when marketing starts to say, we believe that we can drive X percentage of our new business revenue, or we believe that we can hit X amount of dollars in revenue this year. And aligning with, the head of your sales organization on that, they're going to love you. That's going to be a great metric to have and something to track towards, because you're going to be giving them revenue. So sales alignment is just really the key to success, in my opinion, and that's always the first step, is really building that relationship with your sales team. And then next is process. So just like you have to agree on these KPIs and think about your definitions of things, you also have to talk about process. So once marketing hands off that lead to the sales team, what's happening next? What is sales going to do with that? So here at LinkedIn, we have some metrics that we track to all the time. We actually have an agreement with our sales development team who follows up on our marketing leads, that they're going to follow up with anyone who raises their hand and submits a contact form within 1 hour. And so that's something we're tracking to. And that's not something we got to overnight. It's something we had to work towards, but we're pretty much almost there. And we also have an agreement that they're going to try to reach this person 4 times before deeming them disqualified. So it's really important to align on those metrics, and it's even more important to report on those and to have a cadence of reporting. So at LinkedIn, we have a monthly, we call it a monthly demand gen board meeting. And that means we have someone from sales in the room, someone from sales development, and someone from marketing, and usually someone from our business operations team. And we're talking about these metrics every month, and we're looking at them, and we're checking the time to touch. Is it an hour? Is it longer? Why is that? Was there too many leads that marketing passed? Should we adjust our lead score and maybe send less leads, or maybe we need to send more leads? And so having those constant conversations with your sales team is so important, and that's really what's going to set you up for success.
Yeah, I totally agree that the continued conversations are really important, and we're going to dive a little bit more into that in a couple minutes here, the sales and marketing relationship.
Awesome. And so just one last part of this is technology. And we've kind of covered off on this, so I'll keep it short, but basically making sure you have the right systems in place that we just talked about. So marketing automation, a CRM, and then just tracking and reporting tools is really going to be critical to your success.
Awesome. So I recently attended the Marketo Marketing Summit here in San Francisco. I believe it was last week, and there were a bunch of conversations about whether how the perception is shifting from marketers being a cost center to more revenue drivers now. I just want to get both of your takes on that shifting conversation, and if you're able to share if you have a revenue or contribution goal.
Yeah, I mean, I think that conversation has been shifting for a long time now. I think kind of with the introduction of systems like marketing automation systems, where marketers can actually track how their campaigns are doing down to the dollar revenue that they're bringing in. Certainly, I feel like marketers have gotten more of a seat at the table because of that. And I think because the tools become available now, we can really run campaigns and prove how much we're contributing to the overall bottom line. And for us, at least, and it's probably similar in marketing solutions as well, we definitely have a revenue contribution goal in terms of percentage contribution, as well as a hard number in terms of how much we should be delivering. And it's something that we agree to along with sales to really work with them to say, hey, you guys are going to bring in this much, we're going to bring in this much too, and so together we're going to work together to hit our kind of top line goals.
Yeah, I would echo Patrick's thoughts. I think the conversation has been evolving for a long time about this, and when marketing and automation was introduced, it gave marketers this ability to track it, and it's actually, I think it's been really great for marketers. Like, I love analytics and I love being analytical and seeing the results of what I'm doing. So when I can go to sales and say, we've actually driven X amount of dollars of revenue, that's a really powerful thing, and it sort of, it gives marketing a seat at that sales table. Yes, as Patrick said, we also have a goal that we track to percentage of contribution, and then we actually track to a new customer number, but and a certain we want a certain percentage of the new customers driven by marketing each quarter.
Right.
Or each year.
So we've talked a little bit about sales and marketing alignment. You guys have both touched on the importance. I think that traditionally it's like, is it a love-hate story? Is it a love story? I don't know. I mean, regardless, like when sales and marketing are aligned, it's just proven that the teams are more effective and they generate more revenue. So we're curious, I'm going to turn it back to you guys, the audience. We're curious about what's going on within the organizations tuned in today. So my question for you is, how do you rate your sales and marketing alignment? And option number one, it's great. We collaborate all the time. Communication is super solid. We're killing it. The second is it's okay. We collaborate sometimes, but communication is not so great. And there's still some silos that we're trying to break down. And then the third is it can definitely be improved. And maybe that's one of the reasons why you're on this webinar, because you want some tips from our team here. I'll give you a couple seconds to respond, and then we'll discuss the results. All right, it looks like another almost, split, complete split between it's okay and it could be definitely improved. So I'm glad we have these two experts here to help us out. They can give us our tips. First of all, how would you describe your relationship with sales?
I would describe it as really good. And I think maybe we're in more of a unique position because the product that we sell is for sales professionals. So we really rely heavily on our sales team to not only work with us really closely on qualifying leads, but to also give us feedback and guide us in terms of what's kind of the pulse of the market out there, because these guys are not only on the front lines talking to our prospects, but they're also our customers too, right? They use the product, and so they really know what's hot and what's not hot and what's working, what's not working. And so we work with them really closely in terms of understanding the market and also making sure that we're delivering to them the leads that they can work. So I would say really good.
And Amanda, how's your relationship going?
I would say it's going really good as well. But I think that's also been a journey. And even in the last 6 months, there's been a lot more alignment between our two teams. So I spend a lot of my day in meetings with sales teams and talking to the sales managers and the AEs directly to understand what we're doing, what is working, what's not working, and getting their feedback. And then also trying to understand where there's gaps and like where we can try to help fill those gaps, and whether that's using sales enablement tools or just creating simple email templates for them to use. There's just lots of opportunity. And so really I've worked hard to build relationships with a lot of the key sales stakeholders, and that has been what changed and what pivoted between our relationship being good to really good. And so it's been a great journey for our two teams.
So how often do you say you meet with them? It sounds like daily or weekly or?
It depends on the team, but okay. I am meeting probably with someone in sales almost daily.
Okay. Same with you, Patrick?
Yeah, I think it's definitely like a really tight relationship.
Yeah, and it's at LinkedIn. We have a lot of teams here too. So there's like sales development and sales, and we have 3 different sales teams within our sales team. So there's a lot of people to meet with. So it's daily, but I would say like at a minimum weekly would be important to maintaining that relationship.
So other than the meeting frequently, open lines of communication, do you have any other tips for companies trying to get aligned with sales? How do they get started?
I think that kind of what Amanda was talking about before about aligning goals, really understanding the KPIs that you both need to deliver, and agreeing on things like what is the threshold for a marketing qualified lead, what is the threshold for a sales qualified lead, what's the SLA for following up with the lead. All those things are really important, and if you don't come to agreement on them, I've definitely been in companies before where there's a lot of like blame game kind of thing, where if in a particular quarter, like let's say numbers don't look good, sales will blame marketing for not delivering good leads, marketing will blame sales for not following up on the good leads they're delivering. So there can be that conflict if you're not kind of in alignment beforehand.
Yeah, and I think it's also about being proactive. So like really getting a grip on not only your numbers as a marketer and how you're pacing, but the numbers of the sales team. And so if the sales team isn't having a great quarter, like being proactive and going to the sales managers and saying, is there something that marketing can do? Or what are you seeing is happening out there that maybe we can try to help solve for? Like what are these pain points? And so just being really proactive with those teams and having a very open relationship. You know, the reverse is also true. Sometimes when our numbers are struggling, I will go to the sales team and say, hey, we're having a tough quarter. Like, what are you seeing out there? Is there an issue with the quality of the leads? Like that kind of closed loop feedback on what sales is seeing is like super important to both of our successes.
Yeah, and so we talked about, you know, aligning on goals. And so, I mean, I'm assuming that you guys have shared goals. So what metrics do you track and which do you align with sales on most closely?
So our two metrics that we align with them on are we align on most, but the big ones are sales qualified opportunities, and then also the closed business or the new customers number. And that is because sales qualified opportunities is something that both marketing and sales kind of have control over. Sales is qualifying those leads and making sure that they're worthy of an opportunity creation, but also it's telling marketing if they're passing the right types of people and if the lead quality is right. So it's an easy one to kind of reflect and pivot on, and it's something that you can kind of do earlier in the funnel before it's too late. So those are the big numbers we align on.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And also even looking a little bit further up the funnel too, as well, since we work with the sales development team, which are kind of like they're the frontline sales reps that work on the leads that we're delivering, looking at how many marketing qualified leads we're delivering and how many of those marketing qualified leads are becoming SQLs. So that's another one.
Awesome. I hope that was helpful for everyone who's looking to align with their sales team. Lots of tips there. Now we're going to move to the questions that are a little bit just more for fun, to get to know Amanda and Patrick's personalities a little bit better. The first is, what's your one desert island metric? So you're stuck on an island, you can't choose water or wine, you have to choose a metric.
Wine.
What metric do you choose?
Well, I'm going to say ROI because I feel like if I can at least prove my value, maybe I can prove my way off the island.
Nice.
I don't know if there's anyone to prove it to, but
Clever.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. Like, definitely the one thing that really is important, I think, in marketing these days is being able to prove your worth. And so if it's not ROI, then certainly like opportunities that you're creating definitely helps as well.
Okay. As demand gen marketers, what keeps you up at night? Or are you sleeping real soundly?
No, I'm going to say it's my pipeline, my
Your pipeline,
marketing source pipeline. Because if that's not looking healthy and good, then I'm going to be tossing and turning and wondering, what can I be doing better? What campaigns are not working? Which ones are? But I mean, I think it's important to stay on top of that because again, it sort of helps you get out ahead of like, if you can keep an eye on your pipeline and see early in the quarter that maybe it's not looking so healthy, you can probably have time to make adjustments to still close out and beat your goal. So that's a metric that if it's not looking good, then I'm definitely stressed about that.
Yeah, I would agree. And say like MQL to SQL conversion is another one. Just so I know that all the work that I'm doing generating these leads is actually being followed up on, and they are good leads to begin with. So I think that's really important too.
Okay. Most annoying industry buzzwords?
I want to say thought leader. I mean, you hear it all the time.
Yeah.
And what does it even mean? Like, I don't know. I feel like people say it way too often. And if you're calling yourself a thought leader, then I don't know.
Yeah, it's like if you're calling yourself cool, are you cool?
Right.
Probably
are
not.
You not? Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly.
All right.
This is a tough one for me. I'm going to go with ABM, which is account-based marketing. And it's not that I don't like account-based marketing. It's just, it is the term. It is the buzzword right now. So I'm kind of just, it's like, it's like that Taylor Swift song you hear over and over again. I'm tired of hearing about ABM.
Yes.
I also think ABM is like a really broad concept.
Yes.
And so people use it a lot and probably not always in the right ways. So we need to kind of hone in and sort of break down what ABM is a little bit more as marketers.
Yeah.
As you guys know, marketing in general is ever evolving, is an ever evolving landscape. But what's the biggest change that you guys have seen in marketing measurement in the past couple of years? And if you have an example, and how your team has adjusted?
I think so. In the last couple of years, it's definitely been this shift towards marketing, like attribution and revenue and ROI. And I think. I don't know how my team's shifted. I think it's been something that we've been probably working towards for a long time, but it's an evolving process. So like getting to a point where we can have multi-touch attribution is really important. And so that's something that is definitely not an easy concept. And there's a lot of thought leaders out there about it.
Yeah, for sure.
And there's a lot of talk about it, but it's not something easy to execute. But there are tools that have come out in the last few years that I think are starting to help marketers kind of reach that more. So it's a tough concept. It's something that's it gets a lot of buzz.
Yeah, I think along with kind of the multi-touch stuff, I feel like it's been a really difficult challenge and shift because there are so many ways to look at multi-touch attribution. You can look at it in terms of like all the campaigns that get equal attribution. You can look at a weighted attribution scale. And so all these things are really complicated and really different, and ultimately they affect kind of like the revenue numbers you're reporting. And so I think one of the biggest challenges there is getting sales to buy in on it, right? So that's one of as a marketer, you're introducing kind of this new metric to say that, hey, I'm driving X amount of revenue. And so being able to have sales back you up and believe that and say, yes, you guys are delivering that value. I think that's definitely been a challenge and a shift in terms of building that relationship and getting not only marketing on board, but also sales.
All right, and then last one, and it's definitely super important and marketing related. Who would play you in the movie version of your life?
I want to say for me, John Cho, because, well, one, he's Asian, but also he's a good-looking dude, and Harold and Kumar, quality movie. So.
Yeah. Amanda?
I'm going to go with Reese Witherspoon. I just
choice.
love her. She's adorable, and she was perfect in Legally Blonde.
Yep, who doesn't love it? The first one and the second one.
Exactly.
Both solid. All right, so now we're going to open it up for a bit of Q&A. So I have some questions here submitted. I'm going to go ahead and just, throw them at you guys. The first one is, what do you look for in a marketing automation platform? And what do you recommend for a more entry-level / lower cost?
This is going to be a tough one for me to answer. I feel like I used to work at Marketo, so my mind is a little biased in that way. But I think in terms of looking at a marketing automation system, the things that are important to me are definitely ease of use, right? Because the systems themselves are so hard to adopt, especially company-wide. You want to have something where everyone can kind of get their hands in it and be able to use it. And I think in terms of other features that are important, I think integrations with CRMs, that's huge, because you want to be able to bring in a system that works well with your sales team, and your sales team is using a CRM system most likely. So that's another one. And I think to answer the question about kind of intro marketing automation systems, I know that a lot of the ESPs offer some features. Like I know MailChimp does some features, but there are also other smaller players like I think Autopilot, Sail Through. There are a bunch of them.
Yeah, one other thing I think I would consider when looking at a marketing automation platform is just the support that the company gives. Yeah, that was really, when I was a marketer running a marketing automation system by myself, that was super important to me. So making sure that their support team is very knowledgeable and helpful. And so that was something that I, when I was evaluating systems, would actually get on the phone with customers and ask about. So that was an important piece for me. But I would echo everything else Patrick said.
Awesome. Is there a ballpark proportion for the percentage of SQLs out of MQLs? Like, for example, like 50% of MQLs make it to SQLs. Like, is there a percentage that you guys aim for or that you're happy with?
I think it varies.
Yeah.
I think I've been at different companies, and that conversion rate is always different. It just depends on, I think, the processes that you have in place. But in terms of a ballpark number, I mean, I don't know.
I don't really have one off the top of my head, to be honest, but what I think is important to do is track it for some time and track that conversion rate, and then the goal is just to always improve it.
Right.
So that's what we saw that our MQL to SQL conversion went up last year, and we were excited about that because it meant our funnel was stronger and we were, converting leads better.
Right. And I think part of it is thinking about sales productivity, because for every MQL you bring in that a salesperson has to work on, it takes time, right? And I think for sales, time is money. And so kind of depending on how you set up your processes, it may be higher or lower, that conversion rate, depending on how many reps you have, right? And how productive they can be. Yeah,
something that we do track closely, and I know off the top of my head, is our sales development team likes to have an average of 10 to 15 leads per day per rep, which could be on the low side for some companies. It's just because they like to give them a lot of attention, use social selling, which is a part of our Sales Navigator story. And so that's important to our team, that they have time and attention to give to each lead. So that's a metric that we can track closely. So we sort of then want to base how many marketing qualified leads we should be sending based off that, and then there's a number that we convert out of those.
Okay. I have another one. There's a lot coming in, so I'm trying to get them all in. So this person is at an organization where he or she is the only marketing person. How can they, it's a man, okay. How can I as a one-man wrecking crew be efficient with my limited resources and stuff?
That's rough, dude.
It's a good question.
That's tough. But I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of, smaller businesses on here. Maybe not if it's one person, just a small team. So if you're scrappy, what are the tips?
So I've run a solo demand gen, not the only marketer, but been the only kind of person focused on demand generation. And I think this is where metrics and analytics become really important, because you have to look at the programs that are actually performing, and that's where you need to focus your energy and time. If email marketing does really well for you, focus your efforts there. Something else we did when I was at a smaller business was we partnered with other organizations or industry publications a lot to do webinars, because that, even though it cost more, it was a little bit more expensive, gave me bandwidth because they were doing all the production and the promotion of it. And then, also partnering with them on other types of events and stuff like that can really help get you some leverage as a one-man show.
Yeah, I think just like Amanda said, being able to leverage your work with other partners is really important to kind of amplify what you can do. But I think it also depends on kind of how your sales team is set up, right? If you've got a large sales team to support you, a sales development team where you can start bringing in large volume of leads, then you can kind of look at your marketing in one area where you're going to go broad and try and bring in a lot of demand. But if your sales team is relatively small, maybe what's more high impact for your particular company is doing things like high touch events, right? Doing kind of more of the ABM style stuff, or enterprise, executive events, things like that.
Right. Nice. This question is actually for me. What should content's role be? Is it product/market awareness, brand awareness, or other? So great question. Amanda and I actually meet, so content/social plus demand gen. We have a standing weekly meeting where we talk about, what content we're producing, how things are performing, what we should create more of, what we should be creating less of. So I think it's honestly all of the above. We have different content pieces that serve different initiatives. We have stuff that's super product focused. We have stuff that's a little bit more editorial and thought leadership and a little bit higher level. And then we have our brand awareness campaigns, like Amanda mentioned. The proof campaign that we ran a couple weeks ago. If you're curious, go check it out on the LinkedIn Marketing Solutions blog. But yeah, I know I had to give one more plug. But yeah, we're super, our teams sit right next to each other. We're constantly collaborating. We're constantly talking about, what tests we want to run next, always be testing. And we're just very aligned. So I think content is very much involved in everything that we've talked about today.
I'll throw it out here that this webinar series was a result of that
dialogue.
True.
That's true.
Because we were sharing feedback that a lot of our webinars, people were asking, we needed to just step back and do more of a 101 webinar, which is why we're here today. And then I'll also say that the reason we're doing a video webinar is because we're testing this. see if it works better. Do we get more engagement, or do people enjoy it better? So I'll plug our survey at the end of it. Make sure you fill it out so we know.
Yeah, let us know if this format works better for you. It's definitely been fun to participate in, that's for sure. All right, let's see if we can get at least a couple more in before we have to sign off. Let's see. How about how to measure brand awareness and thought leadership? So lead generation is a little bit easier to measure, but brand awareness and thought leadership can be seemingly more difficult. How do you measure that?
That's a good question. So brand awareness, I think there's a couple of different ways you can look at it more. I'll start there. So I like to look at like traffic. So when we go to market with a brand campaign, keeping a close eye on the traffic to our website is an easy one. So are we driving people to our website? Are they engaging? Also probably similar for the blog too. So driving traffic to the blog. Another interesting thing to look at is to track form submits during that time period. So are you seeing an increase in people who are filling out a contact form, or maybe even clicking into our Create Ad, which is our ad platform? Those are kind of easy metrics to use. If you have some analytics tools that gives you deeper insight into the demographics of the people visiting your website, I always like to take a look at the quality of the traffic coming. So for us, we're always trying to drive marketers to our website. So are we driving marketers, or are we driving, maybe we're driving more salespeople than we intend to be driving, and our message isn't resonating. So I think it's important to kind of look at a mix of those types of things. It is hard to track brand awareness, but those are some of the tools I like to use. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I would say wherever you can, add in unique tracking links. So like even if you're doing like a big PR push, whatever PR you're throwing out there, make sure like if you've got a link in there to an additional resource, like it has a specific link that tracks it back to the PR source.
Yep.
So things like that, whenever you can, do that. And when you can't, yeah, it's tough, but hopefully mostly you can.
Okay, and then one last one before we sign off for the day. Thanks everyone for your awesome questions. What recommendations do you have for refining my analytical skills? There's just too much data out there. More data, more problems.
It's a lot of problems. Yeah, it can definitely be overwhelming, I think, especially if you're, like, let's say you're a one-man show. It's tough. There's so much data out there that you can process. Like, you can end up looking at data all day and not actually doing anything. So I would say just making sure you're picking out, like, what are the important initiatives I need to accomplish, and just picking out a few things to focus on, right? Like, so if you want to first tackle, let's say, hey, my engagement with my emails isn't what it should be. Let's think about a few factors there first. So increasing click-through rates, right? Decreasing opt-out rates, things like that, where you can just tackle something first, make some headway, and then move on to something else.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I was gonna say keep it simple, so start simple, like Patrick mentioned. I think that's really important. So don't get lost in all the data. Pick, have one objective or one goal that you're focusing on, and then track to that. And then when you kind of feel like you've gotten there and you've made some improvement, maybe you can take something else on. But yeah, it's easy to get lost in the data. I've seen LinkedIn data people get lost in the data before.
Yeah, for sure.
So, you certainly have to keep people on track, yourself included. And so it's important to really focus on that, what your goal is. What are you trying to get out of this analysis?
Right. Great. Well, thank you so much. That is all the time we have for today. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I hope that this was valuable information for you, and I hope that you are walking away with some awesome tips to take back to your team. I want to give our console another shout out. There's some awesome resources in there. There's the crash course to marketing metrics and analytics. There's also the LinkedIn Sophisticated Marketer's Guide, and then there's a link to subscribe to the blog. That's the last time I'm going to mention it, I swear. And I just wanted to mention that, so I mentioned in the beginning that this is the first out of a series of webinars of 3. So the second one is on May 17th, and that is with Michael McEwen from AdStage, and then my boss, Megan Golden. That should be interesting. And then there's another one, the final one is on May 30th, and that is Solving for ROI on LinkedIn, featuring Marcus Andrews from HubSpot. So thanks again for tuning in. I hope you have a great day.